The night was cold, and the wind howled through the dense forest. The old wooden cabin stood alone, far from the nearest town. Inside, Daniel Carter, a former engineer, sat by the fire, enjoying the silence. He had left the city life behind years ago, choosing solitude over the chaos of the world. But tonight, something was different. A strange noise came from outside, something heavy crashing through the trees. Daniel's sharp instincts kicked in. He grabbed his flashlight and cautiously stepped onto the porch. The rain was falling hard, and the darkness made it difficult to see. Then he spotted it, a figure stumbling through the mud, barely able to stand. It wasn't a wild animal. It wasn't human either. Daniel raised his flashlight, and his breath caught in his throat. A tall, slender woman collapsed near the edge of the clearing. Her skin was unlike anything he had ever seen, dark as polished obsidian, but with faint, glowing veins running across it. Her long silver hair clung to her face, soaked from the rain. She looked up, and her violet eyes glowed faintly, filled with exhaustion and desperation. Then she spoke in a weak voice, struggling for breath. "Let me stay here. I'll give you what no human woman can." Daniel's mind raced. Who or what was she? A decision to make. Daniel hesitated. Letting a stranger into his home, especially an alien, was a risk. But leaving her outside in this state, that didn't sit right with him. He had never been the kind of man to ignore someone in need. Signing, he bent down and lifted her up. She was heavier than she looked, her body surprisingly dense. He carried her inside, placing her gently on the couch. Her breathing was shallow, and she was shivering. He quickly grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her. Her strange, glowing veins pulsed faintly under her skin, like they were responding to the warmth. Daniel sat on the edge of the table, watching her. "All right, alien lady, who are you? And what do you mean by that?" he muttered. She didn't answer. Her body gave in to exhaustion, and she slipped into unconsciousness. Daniel sighed again. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. Signs of the unknown. While she rested, Daniel examined her more closely. She had no visible wounds, but her body was covered in strange markings, almost like tattoos, except they glowed faintly under the light. He had seen enough sci-fi movies to know this wasn't normal. Was she dangerous? Could she even be trusted? As he sat there thinking, the storm outside grew stronger. The sound of heavy rain against the windows filled the room. But then, another sound. A distant hum, almost mechanical. Daniel stood up, alert. He moved to the window and peered outside. Something was moving in the trees. His heart pounded. He wasn't alone. A shadow in the dark. Daniel quickly grabbed his rifle from the shelf. He wasn't eager to shoot, but he wasn't about to take chances either. Then he saw it, a dark figure standing at the edge of the woods. It wasn't human. Its eyes glowed red, scanning the cabin. Daniel's grip on his gun tightened. His instincts screamed danger. Was it looking for her? Before he could react, the figure disappeared into the trees. Daniel turned back to the woman on his couch. She was still unconscious, unaware of the danger lurking outside. Whatever was going on, he had a feeling this was just the beginning. And for the first time in years, Daniel wished he had stayed in the city. The storm raged outside, but inside the small wooden cabin, there was silence, except for the soft breathing of the mysterious alien woman. Daniel Carter sat near the fireplace, his rifle resting against the wall beside him. His eyes flickered between the unconscious woman on his couch and the dark forest outside. Something, or someone, was out there. He had seen the glowing red eyes, felt the presence lurking in the shadows, and he had no doubt it was looking for her. Daniel let out a slow breath. What had he just gotten himself into? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft groan. He turned sharply. The woman was waking up. A shocking awakening. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing violet, sharp and intense. For a moment, she looked confused, staring at the wooden ceiling, then at Daniel. She shot up in panic, her body tensing. Her glowing veins pulsed brighter as if preparing for something. Hey, hey. Daniel raised his hands. Calm down. You're safe. The woman breathed heavily, her glowing eyes darting around the room. Then, as if realizing she wasn't in danger, she slumped back against the couch. Where am I? Her voice was soft, but carried a strange echo, like two voices speaking at once. My cabin, Daniel said. I found you outside in the storm. You weren't looking too good. She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. You helped me. Yeah, he said simply. Her expression softened slightly. That is unusual. Daniel frowned. Unusual? Why? She hesitated before answering. Because most humans would turn me in, or run away in fear. Daniel crossed his arms. Well, I'm not like most people. Who is she? Now that she was awake, Daniel finally got a good look at her. She wasn't just tall. Her presence felt powerful. Even sitting down, she had an air of strength about her. Who are you? He asked. She hesitated again before answering. My name is Kyra. I am from a world far from here. And I am being hunted. Daniel's eyes narrowed. By who? Thera glanced at the window, as if expecting someone to break in at any moment. They are called the Dominion. They do not tolerate betrayal. Betrayal? Daniel asked. What did you do? Syra looked directly into his eyes, and for the first time, Daniel saw something there. Fear. I ran away, she said quietly. A dangerous secret. Daniel sat back in his chair, watching her carefully. He had no idea what kind of war or politics she was involved in, but it was clear that whoever was chasing her was dangerous. You said they don't tolerate betrayal, Daniel said. What did you betray them for? Zyra hesitated before answering. Because I learned the truth. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And what truth is that? She closed her eyes for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. They told us humans were weak, that your kind was insignificant, but I saw something different. I saw what humans are truly capable of. Your strength, your refusal to break, even when the universe tries to crush you. And I realized everything they taught us was a lie. Daniel was silent. He hadn't expected that. So you ran, he finally said. She nodded. And now they want me dead. The hunters close in. A cold chill ran down Daniel's spine. He had already seen one of the hunters outside, and if they were as dangerous as Syra made them sound, then they weren't going to just give up. You said you'd give me something no human woman can, Daniel said, recalling her words from before. What did you mean by that? Zyra met his gaze. Her expression was serious, almost desperate. Protection, she said. Daniel blinked. Protection. She leaned forward slightly. I may be hunted, but I am not weak. If you let me stay, I will protect you. No human woman could do what I can. And you are different from the others. You helped me when no one else would. That means something. Daniel exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Great. So now I've got some intergalactic hit squad after me, just because I didn't let you freeze to death. Zyra gave him a strange look. You regret helping me. Daniel looked at her glowing violet eyes, the fear hiding behind them, and sighed. No, but I'm thinking I might be an idiot for doing it. She tilted her head. Then, I will prove to you that you made the right choice. Before Daniel could ask what she meant, a loud sound echoed from outside, a deep metallic hum. Daniel grabbed his rifle and rushed to the window. His stomach tightened. A dark figure stood at the tree line, watching the cabin. Zyra stood up behind him. Her glowing veins pulsed brighter. They found me, she whispered. Daniel tightened his grip on his rifle. Well then, let's see what they've got. The night outside was darker than before, the wind howling through the trees. The deep metallic hum continued, growing louder. Something was coming. Daniel tightened his grip on his rifle, his eyes locked on the shadowy figure at the tree line. Whoever it was, they weren't alone. More figures moved in the darkness, barely visible, but Daniel could feel them. Behind him, Thyra's glowing veins pulsed brighter. He could sense her tension, the way her body tensed as she stared at the approaching enemies. "They are here," she whispered. Daniel glanced at her. "How many?" She closed her eyes for a second. 4. No, 5 of them. One is different. Stronger. Daniel let out a slow breath. "Great, that's just what I needed tonight." Thyra turned to him, her violet eyes serious. "We need to leave." Daniel shook his head. "If we run, they'll chase us. They'll catch us in the open. Here, we have cover." Thyra hesitated. "Then, we fight." Daniel smirked. "We defend." The first attack. A moment later, something moved fast, a dark blur rushing from the tree line toward the cabin. Daniel barely had time to react before a heavy thud shook the front door. Bang! The door trembled under the impact. They were trying to break in. Daniel took position near the window, aiming his rifle. His heartbeat was steady, his hands firm. He had fought before. This wasn't the first time someone had come knocking with bad intentions. Thyra stepped beside him. "They will not stop." Daniel nodded. "I figured." Another impact. The wood cracked. Daniel took a deep breath and aimed. The moment the door burst open, he pulled the trigger. Bang! The first shot hit the attacker's shoulder. It staggered back, but to Daniel's surprise, it didn't fall. Now he got a better look at them. Tall, armored, and inhuman. Their dark metallic suits shimmered in the dim light, their helmets reflecting the glow of Thyra's veins. Daniel narrowed his eyes. This wasn't just some random bounty hunter. This was something worse. Dominion enforcers. Thyra muttered. "Elite soldiers." "Perfect," Daniel muttered. "Just what I wanted." The wounded soldier snarled and raised a sleek black weapon, but before he could fire, Thyra moved. In a blur, she was already in front of the soldier, her hand glowing with energy. She struck fast, her palm hitting the enforcer's chest. A burst of violet energy exploded outward, sending him crashing through the door and into the snow. Daniel blinked. Okay, that was impressive. Thyra didn't respond. More enemies were coming. A desperate fight. 2 more enforcers stormed inside, moving with deadly precision. Their weapons hummed with energy, and before Daniel could react, a blue pulse of light shot toward him. He dove to the side, the blast scorching the wooden wall behind him. Rolling onto one knee, he raised his rifle and fired. 2 shots, center mass. The first enforcer stumbled, but the armor absorbed most of the impact. The second aimed at Thyra. She dodged, twisting her body just as the energy blast zipped past her. With a swift movement, she lunged forward, grabbing the enforcer's wrist and twisting it. Crack! The enforcer let out a distorted scream as his weapon clattered to the floor. Daniel didn't hesitate. He shot the wounded enforcer in the helmet. The armor wasn't strong enough to stop a direct hit. The soldier collapsed. Only one remained inside now, but before Daniel could fire, the cabin shook violently. Bang! Something massive had landed outside. Thyra's face darkened. The leader. Daniel gritted his teeth. Of course there's a leader. The last enforcer inside took advantage of the moment. He lunged at Daniel, knocking the rifle from his hands. Daniel barely managed to block the next strike, but the soldier was strong. Too strong. Thyra moved to help, but the wall suddenly exploded inward. A towering figure stepped inside. The commander arrives. The leader was different from the others, taller, bulkier, and completely covered in dark, jagged armor. A deep red visor glowed from his helmet, scanning the room. Thyra froze, her body tense. "Thyra of the Velori." The leader spoke, his voice deep and mechanical. You cannot escape. Daniel punched the enforcer in front of him, knocking him back. He grabbed his rifle from the floor and aimed at the new threat. The leader didn't react. "Human," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "You are not part of this war. Step aside." Daniel exhaled. "Yeah, see, I don't like it when people break into my home and try to kill me. Kinda makes me angry." The leader tilted his head. "You protect her." Daniel glanced at Scifi. She was breathing heavily, but her violet eyes were still sharp, determined. Daniel smirked. "Yeah, guess I do." The leader laughed, a deep metallic sound. "Then you die with her." Without warning, he raised his gauntlet. A red energy pulse charged up, humming with power. Daniel barely had time to react. Zyra did. With blinding speed, she leaped in front of Daniel, her hands glowing. Boom! The leader fired. Zyra threw up a shield of energy, blocking the blast. The force sent her crashing backward into Daniel. He caught her, barely managing to stay on his feet. The leader stepped forward. His energy weapon charged again. Daniel cursed under his breath. They weren't going to survive another hit like that. Zyra gritted her teeth. "We have to go." Daniel glanced at the back door. "There's an old tunnel beneath the cabin. It leads into the forest." Zyra nodded. "Then we move." Now, Daniel fired one last shot at the leader's visor, not to kill, but to distract. Then he grabbed Sarah's hand, and they ran. Daniel and Sarah sprinted into the underground tunnel beneath the cabin. The air was damp, and the walls were lined with old wooden beams, barely holding the structure together. The sound of heavy boots above them sent chills down Daniel's spine. The Dominion enforcers were searching for them. Zyra was breathing heavily, her glowing veins flickering with energy. The last attack had drained her. Daniel could feel the weight of her exhaustion as they ran deeper into the tunnel. "Are you okay?" he whispered. She nodded but didn't speak. Daniel could tell she was struggling to stay on her feet. They didn't have time to rest. Behind them, a loud metallic voice echoed through the tunnel. "Run all you want, human. There is no escape." It was the commander, and he was getting closer. A dangerous path. The tunnel led them into an open cave system, with narrow pathways twisting in different directions. Daniel quickly led Zyra down a hidden route, barely visible in the dim light. "This way," he whispered. As they moved, Zyra suddenly grabbed his arm, stopping him. Her violet eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "They are splitting up," she said. "Some are searching the surface. The rest are following us." Daniel clenched his jaw. They needed a way to slow the enforcers down. His eyes scanned the cave walls. The structure looked unstable. If he could cause a collapse, it might buy them time. He turned to Zyra. "Can you blast the ceiling?" She frowned. "I can, but it will drain me more." Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to push her, but if they didn't stop the enforcers now, they wouldn't survive the night. "I'll help you," he said. Zyra stared at him, then nodded. She placed a glowing hand on the cave wall. Daniel pulled a small explosive charge from his belt, one of the last he had, and planted it on a weak point in the rock. "On my signal," he said. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel behind them. The enforcers were getting closer. Daniel took a deep breath. Now. Zyra released a pulse of energy just as Daniel detonated the charge. Boom. The ceiling caved in. Rocks tumbled down, sealing the tunnel behind them. The sound of angry shouts was drowned by falling debris. Daniel let out a breath. That should slow them down. But when he turned to Zyra, his stomach tightened. She was pale, her body swaying. "You okay?" he asked. Zyra nodded weakly. "I need rest." Daniel put an arm around her, supporting her weight. "We'll rest when we're safe. Come on." The silent stalker. They kept moving through the caves, their steps careful. The deeper they went, the colder it got. Daniel could feel the damp air against his skin. For a moment, there was only silence. Too much silence. Daniel slowed down, his instincts screaming at him. Something wasn't right. Then, a soft, metallic click. His eyes widened. A trap. Before he could react, the floor beneath them collapsed. Daniel grabbed Sci-Fi, pulling her close as they fell into darkness. Trapped below, they hit the ground hard. Daniel groaned, pushing himself up. His rifle was gone, lost in the fall. He reached for his sidearm instead. Sci-Fi coughed, shaking dust from her silver hair. Where are we? Daniel looked around. They had fallen into an underground chamber, filled with glowing blue crystals. Strange alien markings covered the walls. This place, Sci-Fi whispered, her eyes wide. Daniel turned to her. What is it? She placed a trembling hand on one of the markings. This is an ancient Velari sanctuary. Daniel frowned. Your people built this. Sci-Fi shook her head. No, something older. Something dangerous. Daniel's grip tightened on his gun. Great, just what we need. Before Sci-Fi could respond, a low growl echoed through the chamber. Daniel froze. Something was down here with them. The Guardian awakens. A shadow moved between the crystals. Daniel raised his weapon, heart pounding. Sci-Fi's voice was barely a whisper. The Guardian. Daniel glanced at her. Guardian? She swallowed. This place is protected by an ancient creature. It will not let us leave. Daniel cursed under his breath. First enforcers, now this. A deep guttural growl vibrated through the air. Then, red eyes appeared in the darkness. A massive shape stepped forward, towering over them. Its body was covered in dark, chitinous armor, and its clawed hands gleamed under the blue light. Daniel took a step back. This thing was a predator. The Guardian sniffed the air, then focused its gaze on Sci-Fi. Daniel tightened his grip on his pistol. If this thing made a move, he'd shoot first. The Guardian tilted its head. Then, in a voice that sent shivers down Daniel's spine, it spoke. Velari, why have you come? Sci-Fi trembled. We seek refuge. The Guardian growled. You bring death to this sacred place. The hunters follow. You will not leave. Daniel exhaled. This thing wasn't just going to let them go. He turned to Sci-Fi. Can you reason with it? Sci-Fi hesitated. I can try. The Guardian's claws flexed. Choose your words carefully, Velari. Daniel stepped beside her. His pistol was ready. If this thing didn't listen, they'd have to fight. And Daniel wasn't sure they could win. Daniel kept his pistol raised, his heart pounding as the massive creature loomed over them. Its red eyes glowed, scanning both him and Sci-Fi with an eerie intensity. The hunters follow you, the Guardian rumbled. You bring danger to this sacred place. Daniel didn't lower his weapon. He knew this thing could tear them apart in seconds, but running wasn't an option. They were trapped underground, with Dominion enforcers hunting them from above. Sci-Fi stepped forward, her voice steady but respectful. We seek refuge. We mean no harm. The Guardian let out a deep growl. Words are weak. Only action proves truth. Daniel exchanged a glance with Sci-Fi. What does it mean? Sci-Fi hesitated. I think it wants to test us. Daniel frowned. Test us how? The Guardian slowly raised one massive arm. Its clawed finger pointed toward a dark tunnel. There is a path, it said, but only the worthy may walk it. Daniel sighed. That didn't sound good. Let me guess. If we fail, we die. The Guardian bared its sharp teeth. Yes. Into the trial. They had no other choice. Staying here meant death. Facing the Dominion meant death. This test was their only shot. Daniel reloaded his sidearm and nodded at Sci-Fi. Let's do this. They stepped into the dark tunnel. Immediately, the temperature dropped. The walls narrowed, forcing them to move in single file. Daniel's boots crunched on something brittle. He looked down. Bones. Zyra's breath caught. Many have failed before us. Daniel grimaced. Let's make sure we're not next. A deep growl echoed from ahead. Something was waiting for them. The first challenge. As they walked deeper, the tunnel opened into a wide chamber. Strange blue fire burned in stone bowls, casting flickering shadows on the walls. And in the center stood a creature. It was twice the size of a human, covered in thick, obsidian-like armor. It had no eyes, only a jagged mouth filled with needle-sharp teeth. Its claws scraped the stone floor as it turned toward them. Zyra's voice was barely a whisper, a shadow beast. The beast let out a piercing shriek and charged. Daniel fired. Bullets sparked against its armor, but didn't pierce. Not working, Daniel shouted. Zyra's hands glowed. She sent a blast of violet energy toward the beast. It staggered but didn't fall. Daniel's mind raced. The Guardian wanted a test. That meant there had to be a way to win. His eyes darted around. The blue flames. They weren't ordinary fire. Zyra, the fire. Try using it. Zyra nodded, raising her hand. The flames lifted from their bowls, swirling into a blazing spear. She hurled it. The spear pierced straight through the shadow beast's chest. It let out a final shriek before collapsing into dust. The room fell silent. Daniel exhaled. One down. But Zyra was shaking. There will be more. The second challenge. They moved quickly, stepping through another tunnel. The air grew heavier, and a strange whispering sound filled the space. Daniel gritted his teeth. Do you hear that? Zyra nodded. It's trying to get into my mind. The whispers grew louder, turning into voices. Daniel's breath caught. It was his father's voice. You're not good enough, Daniel. You never were. Daniel froze. The memory hit him like a punch to the gut. His father's disappointment. The feeling of being a failure. The shadows on the walls shifted. Figures emerged. Illusions of people from their past. Zyra gasped. No, Mother. Daniel clenched his fists. It's not real. The shadows lunged. Daniel and Zyra fought, slashing and blasting at phantoms that weren't truly there. But the illusions kept coming. Their greatest fears, their deepest regrets. Zyra fell to her knees. I can't do this. Daniel grabbed her hand. Look at me. She met his eyes, her own filled with pain. This is just another trick, he said. It can't hurt us unless we let it. Zyra took a shaky breath and closed her eyes. A pulse of energy rippled from her. The illusions vanished. Daniel sighed in relief. Let's keep moving. The final gate. They reached a massive stone door. Ancient symbols glowed along its surface. Daniel ran his fingers over the markings. How do we open it? Zyra's eyes widened. It's not locked. Daniel frowned. Then why is it closed? A voice rumbled behind them. You have faced fear, faced strength, faced your own mind's asterisk. The Guardian stepped into the chamber. You may pass. The door creaked open. A pathway led upward, toward the surface. Daniel turned to Zyra. They had done it. But before they could take another step, the Guardian spoke again. The hunters are still coming. You are not safe yet. Daniel clenched his jaw. They weren't done fighting. The massive stone door groaned as it slid open, revealing a dimly lit passageway leading upward. Daniel and Zyra exchanged a tense glance. They had passed the Guardian's test, but the real danger was still ahead. The Dominion enforcers were still hunting them, and there was no telling what awaited on the surface. We have to move fast, Daniel said, gripping his pistol. They won't stop looking for us. Zyra nodded, her expression determined. And if they find us, they won't take prisoners. The Guardian, towering behind them, watched in silence. Then, in a deep rumbling voice, it spoke. You have proven your strength, but strength alone will not save you. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? The Guardian lifted a massive clawed hand and touched the wall. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a glowing silver medallion. "This is the mark of the protectors," the Guardian said. "It will guide you, but only if you have the will to see beyond the ordinary." Zyra hesitated before taking the medallion. It pulsed faintly in her hands, radiating warmth. Daniel eyed it warily. "How does it work?" The Guardian's glowing red eyes flickered. "You will know, when the time is right." Daniel let out a sigh. Cryptic answers again, but there was no time to argue. They had to move. The tunnel of echoes. The passageway was narrow and cold. Their footsteps echoed eerily off the stone walls. The air smelled damp, and the flickering torches barely pushed back the darkness. Daniel kept his gun raised, his nerves on edge. "If I were a Dominion enforcer, I'd set up an ambush right about." A sudden crack echoed through the tunnel. Zyra barely had time to react before the ceiling above them collapsed. "Move." Daniel shoved her forward as giant chunks of stone crashed down behind them. Dust and debris filled the air, making it hard to see. Zyra coughed, gripping his arm. "They're trying to bury us alive." Daniel scanned the darkness ahead. This wasn't a natural cave-in. Someone had triggered it. A cold voice echoed through the tunnel. "You should have surrendered when you had the chance." Daniel's stomach tightened. Dominion enforcers. A red targeting laser flickered across the wall. "Get down," he shouted. Blaster fire erupted. Fight for survival. Daniel and Sarah dived behind a fallen stone pillar as blue plasma bolts hissed through the air. Zyra gritted her teeth. "There are too many." Daniel peeked out and counted at least 6 heavily armed Dominion enforcers. They were blocking the only way out. His mind raced. They were trapped, outgunned, and running out of time. There had to be another way. Then he saw it, the medallion in Zyra's hands. It was glowing brighter now, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Try using it," Daniel urged. Zyra hesitated, then closed her eyes and clutched the medallion. A sudden gust of energy surged through the tunnel. The torches flared, and for a brief moment, the Dominion soldiers froze. Their bodies stiffened as if they had been paralyzed. Daniel didn't waste the opportunity. He leaped up, firing 2 quick shots. The first enforcer dropped instantly. Zyra's eyes snapped open. It worked. Daniel grabbed her hand. "Then let's go before it wears off." They dashed forward, weaving through the stunned soldiers. One of them managed to shake off the effect and fired a shot. The plasma bolt grazed Daniel's shoulder. He bit back a curse and kept running. Pain could wait. Escape came first. Zyra turned back and raised her hand. A final pulse of energy rippled from the medallion, sending the last standing enforcer crashing against the wall. The exit was just ahead. Daniel pushed forward, ignoring the burning pain in his shoulder. One last stretch. Reaching the surface. The tunnel finally opened into the night air. Daniel gasped as he stepped onto a rocky plateau overlooking the dense alien jungle below. The sky above them was deep violet, filled with swirling stars. Zyra turned back. "They'll recover soon. We need tow." A roaring engine cut through the night. Daniel's blood ran cold. A Dominion dropship hovered above them. Its searchlights swept the area, locking onto them. A voice crackled over a loudspeaker. "There's nowhere left to run." Daniel clenched his jaw. They had made it to the surface, but the fight wasn't over. Zyra looked at the medallion again. Its glow pulsed steadily, as if waiting for them to make a choice. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. He wasn't going down without a fight. The battle wasn't over yet. The Dominion dropship hovered above, its searchlights sweeping over the rocky plateau. The deep hum of its engines vibrated through the ground, and rows of armored enforcers stood ready inside, their weapons aimed directly at Daniel and Zyra. Daniel gritted his teeth. His shoulder still burned from the earlier plasma wound, but there was no time to worry about pain now. This was it. They had made it this far, and he wasn't about to let the Dominion take them. Zyra clutched the glowing medallion tightly in her hand. "There has to be a way out," she whispered, her golden eyes darting across the terrain. The loudspeaker from the dropship crackled. "Surrender. There is no escape." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Yeah, that's what you think." Before the Dominion soldiers could fire, he grabbed Syrah's hand and ran toward the edge of the plateau. Below them stretched a thick jungle, its treetops swaying in the night wind. Zyra's eyes widened. "You're not thinking enough. Jump." Without hesitation, Daniel pulled her over the edge, falling into the unknown. The wind roared past their ears as they plunged downward. Branches snapped as they crashed through the dense canopy, their fall broken by thick, vine-covered limbs. Daniel hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself to his feet. "Kagzura." He turned quickly. She was beside him, breathing hard but alive. From above, the Dominion dropship's searchlights cut through the jungle, struggling to find them through the thick foliage. "They'll send ground forces after us," Tyra said. Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow. "Then we don't have much time." The glowing medallion in Xyra's hand pulsed brighter than ever. Then, a whisper. Not from a radio, not from any soldier, but from the medallion itself. Xyra's eyes widened. It's telling me something." Daniel stared at her. "What?" She hesitated, then spoke. "There's a hidden structure deep in the jungle. A place of power. If we reach it, we might have a chance." Daniel nodded. "Then let's move." The race against time. They pushed forward, running through the dense, alien undergrowth. Strange, glowing plants lit their path, and unknown creatures rustled in the shadows. Above, the dropship hovered, scanning the ground. Dominion enforcers were already deploying. Red targeting lasers flickered through the trees. "They're close," Daniel shouted. Blaster fire ripped through the jungle, sizzling past them. Daniel ducked behind a massive tree, returning fire with his pistol. Zyra gritted her teeth and clutched the medallion. Just a little further. A Dominion soldier lunged from the shadows. But Daniel was faster. He spun, knocking the enforcer's weapon aside and slamming his fist into the soldier's helmet. The enforcer staggered, and Daniel grabbed his rifle, turning it against him. A single shot took him down. "No time to waste," Daniel said, tossing the stolen rifle over his shoulder. They kept moving. The hidden temple. The jungle suddenly opened up into a clearing. Before them stood an ancient stone structure, covered in vines and glowing symbols. "This is it," Zyra whispered. "The Protector's last sanctuary." A distant roar of engines sent a chill down Daniel's spine. The dropship was circling back. Zyra rushed toward the large stone doorway, holding up the medallion. The symbols on the walls flared to life. The massive doors shuddered, then slid open. "Inside now," Daniel yelled. They rushed in just as blaster fire erupted behind them. The moment they crossed the threshold, the doors sealed shut. Silence. For the first time since their escape began, there was no gunfire, no shouting soldiers, just the deep, eerie hum of the ancient structure. Daniel exhaled. "We made it." Zyra looked down at the medallion, its glow now a steady, calming light. "Not just us," she said. "Humanity has made it." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Zyra stepped forward and touched the central altar. A holographic map flared to life. It showed the entire Dominion Empire. Cities, bases, weak points. Daniel's eyes widened. "This is..." Shara nodded. The Dominion feared the Protectors because they held knowledge that could change everything. Daniel felt his heart race. This could help humans fight back. This could bring an end to their rule. Zyra smiled. "And we're the ones who found it." Outside, the Dominion forces pounded against the sealed door. But inside, Daniel and Tyran now had the key to something far greater. something that could change the future forever. The beginning of a new war. As the first beams of dawn filtered through cracks in the temple's walls, Daniel clenched his fists. The Dominion thought they had won. They thought humanity was weak. They were wrong. Xyra stepped beside him. What happens now? Daniel smirked. Now, we take the fight to them. The war wasn't over. It was just getting started. The end. For now.